In today's world, we're all connected, right? We're constantly talking to people from different countries, different backgrounds. But what if I told you the basic rules of conversation could completely change depending on who you're talking to? Well, today we are diving headfirst into the hidden and honestly fascinating world of intercultural communication.
So let's start with a question. How can a simple, everyday gesture, something you do without even thinking, actually cause a major international incident? It seems kind of crazy, right? Well, the answer pulls back the curtain on a huge and often invisible barrier in how we all connect with each other. Okay, let's take the OK sign. Here in the US, you flash this, it means all good, everything's great. Simple. But if you do that same exact gesture in Brazil or in parts of the Middle East, you've just delivered a really offensive insult. This is a perfect example of intercultural miscommunication. And believe me, it happens all the time in ways that are way more subtle than this. So why do these breakdowns even happen? Well, it's because culture is so much more than just the food we eat or the holidays we celebrate. It's actually this powerful, invisible force that shapes how we send, receive, and interpret every single message we encounter. Here's the more, textbook definition. Intercultural communication is the process of sending and receiving messages between people whose cultural backgrounds, and this is the key part, are different enough to influence the communication process. It acts like an invisible filter on everything we say and hear, and most of the time, we don't even realize it's there. A really good way to think about this invisible filter is like a pair of cultural lenses, or glasses. The truth is, none of us see the world with perfect objective clarity. We each view it through a unique set of lenses that our culture gave us when we were growing up. This phrase really gets to the heart of it. Our culture gives us this invisible blueprint that guides how we live, how we think, how we interact. It's learned, it's not something we're born with. And because we've been wearing these lenses our whole lives, we usually forget we even have them on. And when we forget we're wearing these lenses, it leads to a huge roadblock: ethnocentrism. This is basically the unconscious, default assumption that my way is the right way. It's when we use our own cultural blueprint as the yardstick to judge everybody else, which, as you can imagine, often leads us to dismiss anything that's different as being, wrong. And that leads right into our next barrier, stereotyping. Think of it like a mental shortcut. Instead of taking the time to understand a unique, complex person, we just slap a label on them based on an oversimplified idea about their group. At that point, you're not talking to a person anymore. You're talking to a caricature you've built in your own head. Okay, so how do we fix this? How do we get past these massive barriers? This brings us to the fun part, decoding the hidden rules. The good news is we can actually learn to see and understand the invisible rulebook that other cultures are playing by. One of the biggest rules you've got to decode is this whole direct versus indirect communication thing. In direct cultures, like in the US or Germany, the goal is clarity. Let's be efficient, let's say what we mean. But in many indirect cultures, especially in many Asian cultures, the main goal is harmony and saving face, making sure no one is embarrassed. So the real message is often implied, not stated outright. All right, let's take this phrase. I'll see what I can do. If you're from a direct culture, you probably hear that and think, great, they're going to try. But in an indirect culture, what do you think that really means? And here's the translation. A lot of the time, it's a very polite way of saying no. The speaker doesn't want to refuse you directly because they could feel confrontational or damage the relationship. Now, if you take that phrase literally, you could be in for a huge surprise when your project deadline comes and goes. This whole idea ties perfectly into another concept: low context versus high context cultures. In low context cultures, the meaning is in the explicit words you use. Everything is spelled out. But in high context cultures, most of the meaning comes from the situation, from nonverbal cues, from a shared history. It's the difference between needing a super detailed project brief versus just having an unspoken understanding with your team.
And it's not just about the words we use. A huge part of that high context communication is nonverbal. A lot of the time, what we don't say actually speaks louder than what we do. And that makes nonverbal cues a total minefield for potential misunderstandings.
Just look at eye contact. In a lot of Western cultures, making eye contact signals honesty, confidence. You're engaged. But in some Asian and African cultures, that same direct gaze can be seen as aggressive, even disrespectful. And avoiding eye contact isn't a sign of dishonesty, it's a sign of respect and humility. It's the exact same action with a complete opposite meaning. And then you've got your personal bubble. You know, how close you stand to someone when you're talking. That comfortable distance is totally defined by culture. What feels warm and friendly to one person might feel incredibly invasive to another. And if you stand too far away, you might come across as cold and distant.
And get this, even silence, the complete absence of sound, has a cultural meaning. In some cultures, a pause in a conversation is a sign of thoughtfulness. It means you're really considering what the other person said. But in others, that same silence is super awkward and uncomfortable, signaling that something is wrong or that you disagree. Okay, I know this can all seem a little overwhelming, but here's the good news. The goal is not to memorize every single cultural rule on the planet. Instead, it's about developing a toolkit of skills you can use in any situation. So that brings us to our final section, your intercultural toolkit, with practical steps you can start using today. Here are 4 simple steps. Number 1, acknowledge your lens. Just remember that your way is a way, not the way. 2, observe and listen. Pay attention to what's going on, verbally and non-verbally, without jumping to conclusions. 3, ask respectfully. If you're not sure what something means, just ask. It's way better than assuming. And finally, 4, adapt your style. Be flexible enough to build a bridge between your style and theirs. And you know, this is so crucial. The point of all this isn't to erase our differences or to make everyone exactly the same. The real goal is to build mutual understanding. It's about appreciating that people see the world differently and then learning how to connect across those differences with empathy and with respect.
So, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Based on everything we've just explored, what is one cultural assumption, maybe one you didn't even know you had, that you're going to challenge today? Because that's where the real journey to understanding begins.